Hi, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Laura Ann Singh, and I'm here with the American Center in Moscow for a really interesting talk today that we're very excited to present to you. This is going to be a conversation between our viewers and our presenter today, who I'd love to introduce you to. We have with us Miss Lori Zukin, from the Zukin Leadership Institute, essentially. She's founded it. She's an expert in workplace, executive leadership, all of these amazing concepts that she kind of has been able to compile in her career. That's a very, very career. Lori, I read that you grew up in Philadelphia or outside of Philadelphia. Is that right?
I did, in a small town called Westchester, not New York, but Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I know Westchester. And that you grew up in a family drugstore where everybody kind of pitched in and worked, and you had a great community around you. And I think that's such an interesting part before I go into more of your kind of accolades and career, because it seems like it kind of was very formative. It really set the course for some of your work.
It did. It was all about work and love and work and play. And I brought that into what I do now as an executive and team coach. So thank you for noticing that.
Yeah. So Lori is an executive professional coach, basically. So she will, I just wanted to read some of the different hats you wear. You worked in corporate America for over a decade. Is that right?
Yeah.
As an executive, and you've worked as an organizational psychologist, a consultant, an executive and team coach, a facilitator of developmental experiences for executive teams. You are a professor in the leadership school at Georgetown, and just an all-around leadership specialist. So when people are trying to develop good leadership in their organizations, are trying to fix team problems, are trying to address maybe just overall contentment and output, right, in an organization, you're the person they call. Is that right?
That is right. I'm not the only person they call, but I love when they call me, and I love doing the work to support people in communicating better, working more effectively, and really finding what they love inside themselves, because then that drives more satisfaction and better performance.
And can you just give us a brief glimpse as to how you made the switch from being an executive into being someone who comes in and helps executives to achieve potential? I think that's a really fascinating jump.
Yeah. So thank you for asking. When I was working in corporate America, and I got my first promotion to lead other people, I had the benefit and opportunity to work with an executive coach who was supporting me in that transition. And she said to me, I just think you would make a good coach based on what I've heard from others about your leadership. She had interviewed a number of people who I work with and given me their feedback. And something about it just seemed so appealing. So she encouraged me to learn more about it. And I went to Georgetown University's coaching program, and it was absolutely transformational. And I fell in love with one-on-one coaching and team coaching over 15 years ago. So I was already doing leadership development programs, but they were broader. They weren't one-on-one. And so now I do both the one-on-one and the broad leadership programs.
All right. I love this quote. I want to read quickly from your website. That is, you said that you are known for saying in your sessions, love is the bottom line. And you say, after decades of experience, I know that a more connected, attuned way of being isn't just nice to have, it's instrumental in achieving results.
Yeah.
So this isn't just something that's nice if you can get it, it's essential. It's the fundamental building block, which I think is a great way to start talking about our topic for today. Improving workplace effectiveness through awareness. Can you take us into this a little bit?
I absolutely can. Thank you so much for noticing that, and for uh, taking a look at my website. That is sometimes organizations are moving so quickly that they're not, and individuals that they're not taking the time that can be so valuable and looking inside themselves. So again, thank you for noticing that. So I'm going to click on the slides, and here we go. So, and that is essentially what I'm saying. And I want to thank everyone for being here, because what you're doing now is slowing down from your busy day. We all have things going on in our lives, family, work, community, and sometimes the tools to support us in speeding up or doing the things we really want to do are inside ourselves or available to us. We just need to pause for a minute and see that they're there. So I love how Kristen Franklin depicts this. And again, this is my way of thanking you for doing that and being here today with us. A few more quotes that I feel get to the heart of this work is: awareness is like the sun. When it shines on things, they are transformed. And so we'll talk about that today and practice it a little bit. And then one of my favorites from Viktor Frankl: between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in that response lies our growth and freedom. Here are our objectives. I hope that by the end of this hour, you'll learn a little bit about a concept that I learned from my colleague who I teach with at Georgetown, taught with. We still work together, about state of mind. And that really is about that being. How is our being impacting how we act in the world? That you'll get a chance to practice it and then understand if you can shift it. And that's an important caveat. If you can, how you might shift it. I'm not in any way advocating that you should. It's about awareness, and then if you can, and we'll get into that. I will ask for questions along the way, so please know that this isn't just a straight presentation and then Q&A at the end. I will pause periodically for questions, so keep those in mind, put them in the chat, etc. But here's the definition. I'm not going to read it, you can see it. And then what I invite you to do is look at this chart that, again, my colleague Alexander Kaye developed with some colleagues, and he also published it in Harvard Business Review. You can look it up, where he looked at organizations across the globe and had them actually put numbers to words that express one's state of mind. And so you can see a neutral line, and then you can see below the line -1, -2, -3, and words that go with that. And then above the line, +1, +2, and +3. And what I love about this and bringing this to leaders and teams is that if a person is more mathematical and likes to use a number to express their state of mind, they can say, I'm a -2 or I'm a +2. And if they're more verbal, they can choose a word. But this helps to both communicate it as well as distinguish where one is. So I invite you to kind of think about where you are on your state of mind, and also invite you to remember that it varies. It is normal for it to vary. If I could see your hands, I would say, raise your hand if you have been a -3 to a +3 in the past 5 years, in the past year, in the past month, maybe even in the past day. It varies. The key is being aware of it and aware of the impact. And that gets to the next slide, which is that the 3 findings that help us with that awareness are, yes, it varies, as I just said. It's the lens through which we see the world. And I'll get into that. And that it impacts others. And as a leader, that's especially important. And I actually think we're all leaders. We all impact other people. And so our awareness of this is so important. Whether you're checking something out at the grocery store, you have an impact on the person who's checking you out. Or if you're the checkout person, you have an impact on the person who you're working with.
It's so funny you just said that. I had an experience 2 days ago where the person that checked me out at the grocery store was so pleasant. It just affected my whole day. I mentioned it to my husband that night. I just it actually lifted my mood because she was
Yes.
so kind and nice. And it's very true what you've just said.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And it is so true. And we can impact the world through these little actions. We may not be the president of X, Y, or Z company or country or whatever it is. These little actions, I truly believe, can make a difference in the world. And so again, I invite us to be aware, and when we can, to shift. So I just ask you all, whether it's in your head or on a piece of paper, just consider your current state of mind. Use a number or a word, whatever works. Just take a second and think about it. I'm just going to pause for a second. And I'm putting this slide back. And then I'll ask Laura Ann, what is yours? And then I'll ask if anybody has any questions. What's your state of mind? Anything is okay.
I think I'm a +1.
Excellent. Thank you. And if I were to ask you for a word, whether on this slide or not, is there a word that?
Well, I like the variability aspect of it, because I think in the last week, I've probably been between a +1 and a -1 and kind of shifting between those two things, but mostly content.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I would say I am a +2 right now. Excited to be here with everyone. Last night, I got back from a lot of travel and I was a -1, just exhausted. And so I had to remember that as my husband so nicely picked me up from the airport and, took the time to do that. And I was just wiped out. And so really thinking about how to appreciate his doing that, even though I was sort of just below the line. So just want to share that. Any questions coming?
I think we're early on, so we can keep.
Okay, we'll keep going. All right, well, let's get into the second piece, which is, so I said variability, personal lens. It is the lens through which we see the world. And actually, the example I just gave is a good one. I love my husband. He's so nice for picking me up, and I was tired. And so I might not see him in the same light when I'm below the line as when I'm above the line. Or when there is loads of laundry on the floor, I might not even notice it if I'm a +2 or a +3. And if I'm a -2, I might notice it. Those are simple examples. You can think of those in your workplace, in your community, in your home. Again, it's the awareness that we're looking for and the pause to think, where am I? Some people will say, I kind of feel like I'm a +1 and a -1. That's okay. It's the awareness. It's not the perfection. I want to play a little bit with the domains through which we see the world, the lens through which we see the world. These are just examples. There's a bunch of them here. And I chose decision making because that happens in our lives a lot and in organizations, both in leaders and teams, and just play with how our lens on decision making can impact the way we make decisions. Our lens on the world can impact the way we make decisions. So I'll start with the middle. Let's start with just being content, which is where you are, Laura. If you are making decisions, you are in I don't want to say good or bad, because it's not bad to be below the line, but you're in a solid place to make decisions. You're more likely to have patience. If you're in a team, there's likely to be more balanced participation, exploratory conversations, assuming that others on your team are around a +1, +2. Now, I will say as an individual, if I'm a +3 and I have to make a decision, it's not necessarily always best because I can overpromise. I can get excited. Oh, this opportunity, this, oh, but I'm going to buy this. I'm going to do this. I can overcommit, or as this says, have overambitious decisions. So my awareness of that is very important. And it's not bad, it's awareness. And then if you are below the line, what happens to decisions? In a team, there might not be a lot of engagement, might be snap decisions. Oh, we're just going to decide now. And then 3 weeks later, we realize that wasn't the best decision. Let's revisit it. It can frustrate the team, etc. Mm-hmm. So I think you've gotten the point from this example, but you can go back to these various domains in your life and think about how your state of mind impacts the lens through which you see those domains. And
this is really a great way of just kind of mapping this all out. I've always laughed about that. I can tell how good or bad a day my husband had at work. He doesn't love to come home and talk about work. He's kind of ready to close the door on that when he comes home usually, and likes to just be home. And but I can always tell if he's had a good day or a bad day by the tone of voice he uses with our dogs. Mm-hmm. It's a communication, like the lens is there for communication with, and it's always on the dogs. Really, that's how I can see if he's frustrated, like, or if it's been okay, like things have been pretty smooth.
Yeah. Yep. It definitely shows in our way of being. So good. And that actually is a good segue to impact. A leader's state of mind sets the tone. So when a team leader is in a positive mood, and this is research that's been done, that the group's performance is actually enhanced. And if the leader is in a negative mood, it does spread to the leader, and the performance can suffer. It also impacts coordination. So when leaders were in a positive mood, group members experience more positive emotions and coordinated better. Not surprising, but useful to think about. So the impact of it. So how do we become more aware of our state of mind? Certainly just pausing and thinking about the tool that I shared on the first slide of the numbers below the line, above the line. That is a wonderful way. And by the way, there are now apps on phones with, mood meter and such. So I invite you to take a look at those. It doesn't take a long time. It just takes the intention to do it. And then importantly, the question of how do you shift when you noticed that your state of mind could impact your ability to lead effectively. And Laura, maybe I'll ask you to think about this question is, as I say that second bullet, how do you shift? I'm curious what comes up for you, if anything.
Yeah. So I'm a musician, I'm a vocalist. And so I've been thinking about this as it just pertains to my work, which is different than a corporate environment, but also not that different in some ways, right? Mm-hmm. And I've thought about the times where either I or one of my band members have shown up to a recording session or a gig or performance or a rehearsal, and they are just not in a good place. And how does that affect? Do they let that spill over? Do they compartmentalize and just keep it tight and try to just like get to the next, like try to do a shift, kind of force a shift. And sometimes it's easier to do that than others. I'm fascinated to know how to shift or some tools maybe to know how that because there's no way to not allow some of that bleed between our personal and our professional lives.
Yep. Or even our personal and our personal. If we are
Right.
having a bad day with one individual, and how does that impact how we're interacting with another person who we love? So it's all of that. And I want to just make a very important point that I am not here to say that if you are feeling sad and that is a theme, that you should just shift. That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that if you are aware that you are below the line and you wish to shift so you can play music with your group effectively, or if you are leading a team and you feel like it will be helpful and you can, this is the tool, and I'll show it in a minute. And if you can't, there are other options as well. So again, we need to take the time to grieve if we're grieving. I want to make that point because I think that's very important, and our mental health is important.
Yeah, it's not rushing through emotions. It's not stuffing down, right?
Yeah. And it might be for a half hour, I am going to shift and then I'm going to go back to whatever it is. It might be. I'm not being prescriptive about it. I'm sharing the tool in the context of you being in choice about how to use it. So I just want to say that important piece. And thank you for your example of how it affects the music. Okay, notice, shift, share is the tool I would like to share with all of you. Again, thanking my colleague, Alexander Kaye. So first, prior to engaging with others, or even while you're engaging, just pausing, like literally, and you can even do it while you're in a meeting. What I sometimes do is I call it find my feet. I will literally just put my feet on the ground and feel them. And that helps me to pause and notice how I am feeling. And if you're in a meeting, if you're playing music, if you're whatever it is you're doing, it's not disruptive.
Right.
Another thing I might do, you can see my fingers. Some people have done this, is just touch your fingers. That is a nice way to pause and notice, what is my state of mind right now? -1, -2, what is it? Just pausing. I've had some of my clients who they've gotten feedback that they're pretty reactive. So someone might say something and they start interrupting and they get their voices loud, and they've gotten feedback that it's not motivating to their team and that's not their intent. And so rather than just being reactive, they doodle. So someone says something, instead of responding, they doodle and notice, okay, I'm a -2. I'm doodling. I'm going to pause and I'm going to shift. I'm curious if you, Laura, or others have questions about the pause, or if you in the audience have other tools that you use. My guess is people have tools. There's no magic tool. It's based on what works for you.
Yeah, there are things that we develop just as coping, right, mechanisms when we've realized maybe an outburst is not going to be effective, right, or useful, or appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really it's a very helpful
Yeah.
tool, because I think it's much better to be aware of it than to just immediately shift.
Yeah.
Because that's part of, I think, the big difference between maybe denial and just powering through an emotion and pretending like you don't feel it, and allowing yourself the grace to kind of acknowledge where you are, acknowledge that you need to be somewhere else for the moment, and that you can always come back to that, especially when you're talking about a negative. I like the idea of it even being on like the excessive side, though. If you're too animated, if you're too energetic for a group, that you can consciously maybe acknowledge that, appreciate that, and then rein it in a little. I think that's a fascinating counter to the idea of being lower. I think that's how most people probably just perceive it being more negative. But
Yeah.
everybody's been around people that are just too much. It's too
Yeah.
extra. It's kind of filling up the whole room with the
Yeah.
energy. There's no way to kind of enter in,
Oh, I love how you brought that up. I was working with a team over the last few days, and one of the rules of engagement was take space and make space, meaning speak up. And also, if you're someone who tends to speak up a lot, make space for others. And sometimes when people are very energized and they're extroverts, they might forget to make space. So being aware of where they are, state of mind wise, can help them regulate that take and make space depending on their introversion and extroversion. Good. Another just story I'll share about noticing one's state of mind is when I did get my first promotion at my company that I was referring to before. I was very anxious about my first meeting, and I was literally like running to the meeting with my notebook and my pen and all excited and making sure I was going to be on time. And a colleague literally like pulled, I mean, not physically, but he called me into his office and he said, "Zukin, you need to slow down. You are a leader now and people are watching you. And so if you're running to that meeting, they are going to think something is wrong. It's very likely they're going to interpret, or they're going to feel that nervousness.
Yeah.
They're going to feel that +3 or -3, however they interpret it. So just slow down." And so the walking more slowly helped me to slow down a little bit and regulate my state of mind and enter the meeting more calmly. So that was a very helpful tip that I got from that person. So back to the slide, noticing one's state of mind and then thinking about the impact. So if I'm running to the meeting, what's the impact going to be? Well, people might interpret that as something's wrong. Or if I come into the meeting out of breath, what are others going to think about how I'm feeling and how is that going to impact them? So various ways you can notice your state of mind. And then shift. If you think that the impact might not be helpful, then shift your state of mind using this method. Surprise, surprise. Breathing is part of it. Again, I know there are all kinds of tools out there about breathing. I'm just going to share this one. And I've gotten some feedback from colleagues that the idea of doodling or finding your feet works for them as well. So if breathing obviously we all have to breathe, but if you're tired of hearing that, then doodle. If you need to take some action, move something, fidgets in meetings, your pen, anything, do that to support you.
I really like that, because sometimes I have made myself more anxious thinking about breathing.
Yes. Yes.
If I'm already feeling it.
Yeah.
It gets too much. And so something physical. I love the finding your feet thing, and even the walking into the meeting rather than running. That so much of our physical state is so deeply connected to our mental state. And so that slowing down one sometimes will just automatically trigger the other.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I'm guessing that as a musician, hearing some music may support the
Oh yeah.
the connection, the integration, the synergy of the heartbeat and the breathing and the brain. I mean, I noticed that as a listener, not as a player. So yeah.
I think that a part of I don't want to derail here, no rabbit
Yeah,
trails,
examples are good.
but part of the challenge of performing is to be nervous and to get away from that so that what you put out doesn't sound nervous.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find some stillness, something inside that is solid, that feels maybe just even shifting from nervousness to excitement.
Yes.
Sometimes in your mind can be the little tiny change you need so that what the impact of your sound is not, I'm nervous. I need to fill up this space. I need to do a good job. There's a serenity that you want to impart rather than or a confidence, maybe is a better word to say.
Beautiful. And I love that. And that gets to the third part of this, which is the reframe. Is it nerves? Is it excitement? How to reframe what we're feeling. So here are the 3 steps. Not terribly complicated. Pause, breathe, reframe. So pause. Just be. It can literally be a half of a second. It can be in a busy meeting where you're pausing yourself, you're doodling, you're doing whatever, you're finding your feet. It's not something that is a 5-minute thing.
Mm-hmm.
Though it can be, and I invite all of you to take 5 minutes every day. 4 would be acceptable too, if you don't already. I love the exercise of simply breathing in and counting to 5, breathing out and counting to 5, and doing that for 5 minutes. If you do that every day, it is easier to notice when you're below the line and then to shift. It's like the playing piano. You're practicing so that when you play, you're ready. So pausing. Again, the pause can be, it doesn't have to be noticeable to others. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And then the breathing. And as you inhale, you accelerate your heart rate. As you exhale, you slow it down, and that brings coherence to your heart rate, which means that your heart and your breathing and your mind are more aligned. So you can see the green lines here, the green squigglies. That is coherence in your heart rhythm, meaning that in between your heart beats, they are aligned, whether it's a high heart rate or a low heart rate, as opposed to a lot of variance where it's almost like putting your foot on the gas pedal and the brake constantly. That's incoherence. So if you're nervous or below the line, you're likely to be incoherent. And if you slowly breathe in and slowly breathe out, you can actually start to control your heart rhythms. And I'm making a distinction here between your heart rate variability and the rate of your heartbeat. So you could be in coherence, i.e. have coherence while you're running the marathon. A high heart rate, but it's still even in between your heartbeats. And I think there's some questions. So Laura, I'll ask you if you want me to get to this.
I'd love to go ahead and go to the third step, and then we'll come back and grab these questions because I think this is so helpful.
Great. Okay. So after doing that breathing, so again, I said you don't have to like go right to the breathing. And if you're doodling, if you're playing with a fidget, you do have to breathe. So now I'm breathing, I'm playing with the fidget. I can just slow it down. I can slow down my breathing. Instead of talking really quickly and interrupting that person, okay, I'm fidgeting now, I'm noticing. I'm just going to take a deep breath in and deep breath out. And then it's more possible to reframe. And here's some questions. What is possible? What's the opportunity? I'm feeling nervous. What's the opportunity? Is this nerves? Is this excitement? What is important right now? What could I learn from this situation right now? What does my team want from me in this moment, etc.? So again, it's more possible to reframe after we've done that step 2.
Mm-hmm.
And importantly, as I was saying before, if you can't shift and you still need to engage. So if I'm a leader
Mm-hmm.
and I've just gotten terrible news about our budget, we're going to have to engage in layoffs, or we're going to have to make some very tough decisions. And I have to meet with my team about that. I can't take a break, a 5-minute break, which I would think you could, a 5-minute break. Better to start a meeting late than to walk in angry, or, I'll just call it angry. Just ask for support. Hey, I just got some bad news, or I got some tough news. I'm feeling below the line. And I'll just ask that you understand that I might not be my best right now.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you can't share all of the details, hey, I'm not at my best right now, and please understand. So grace is another piece
Mm-hmm.
of all of this, giving each other grace, asking oneself for grace. And I want to get to the questions, if it's okay, Laura.
So the first question is for people who are leaders already. So you have a team under you, or you are the one people are looking to really to set the course for the energy, for the mood of a whole group of people. How can a leader encourage their teams to develop greater self-awareness in a way that feels natural and comfortable rather than forced?
That is a wonderful question. I would say the first part of it is to do it yourself. So I'll talk to you as the leader. As the leader, demonstrate self-awareness by sharing your own state of mind, pausing,
Mm-hmm.
even letting your team know that you're pausing. Okay, let's start our meeting now. Before we get into the content of our meeting, let's just take a minute and check in on our state of mind. Show them the chart.
Mm-hmm.
And then share, I am a +1 right now. I'm content. Here's why. Now, Laura, what's yours? Now, Jean, what's yours? Now, and then go around the room and ask people. And so by your modeling it as a leader, it's not forced. It can make it more comfortable. That would be my recommendation. And then also, to the point earlier, if you feel that you're below the line and you can't shift, be honest about it.
Mm-hmm. So this kind of dovetails into this question. I think you have a bit of there are places that are trying to be progressive and implement ideas like this, I think, actively into the corporate culture.
Yeah.
But there are also places where it's still very frowned upon to appear anything but very strong all the time. So how can, in places like that, an organization that has not integrated emotional regulation into their policies, how can mindfulness practices be implemented in places where it's still, it might be seen as, I even not to be too, but like even like weak or weird or just
Yeah.
not what they do.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I absolutely understand the perception that it can be viewed as weak, weird, fluffy, whatever the word the word is.
Woo
Yeah, woo woo. A few, and I'm thinking about a company I was just with that is incredibly high performing and had similar concerns. And the way that I worked with them is to, number one, show some of the research on the impact.
Mm-hmm.
So there is data that our emotions impact productivity
Sure.
and and outcomes. So that's number one. Number two is to start to take a tiny, I'll call it safe. I'm having trouble finding the word, but not risk, because I don't want anyone to get fired, but a safe action. And it might be in the form of a question to ask people how they're doing. And you might even use those words, not how are you feeling? How are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And how is that impacting your work? So having them see how their state of mind is impacting the bottom line or the outcome. So how are you doing? How is that impacting? Shows that connection, and getting curious about people's, how they're doing.
Yeah.
So taking that action, I'm not sure. I don't think that is actually too risky. So
Yeah.
data, number one, data,
Mm-hmm.
asking people how they're doing, checking in on people. It doesn't have to be a whole program. It's that kindness that you talked about with the checkout person. Being kind to each other helps. I also do think that as teams become more able to pause, they can see the patterns that lead to those outcomes. And so one of the things I do in my team coaching work is I have a team just pause and say, okay, what are the patterns that are working well?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we get work done quickly, we do this, we do that, and then what are the outcomes? And some of those work really well and some don't. And a lot of times when they're looking at their patterns, they notice that mood and communication are negatively impacting outcomes. So make it a cause effect. That was a long way to answer the question, but
No, that was an excellent answer. I think knowing that it's real science,
Yeah.
like you said, is an important thing. And then also starting to be the change, right? Starting to, these things are things you can practice without anyone really knowing, but then you can share it by allowing space for people to do the same.
Yeah.
I just had a question I was curious to ask you, and then we have another one here from one of our viewers.
Great.
I wanted to know how often you see people opting out of the pause with technology. I just received bad news. Let me just scroll for a second, or let me check my email.
Yeah.
So that I can just distract rather than be aware.
All the time. I'm guilty of it.
Yeah, me too.
All
That's
the time. Yeah, and I think I mean, again, there's research on this. It increases the stress level as well. So
yeah. So how important is this? How do we start to implement these in places where, honestly, we have to use our phones, we have to use our computers, we have to be engaged and online? What are some ways that you found that are effective to actually take the pause, to stop the distraction cycle of just kind of like I don't want to deal with that. that's too hard right now, so let me just dive into something else. Which I do think for myself, I've noticed that it just increases my anxiety,
So what I have done with several of my one-on-one coaching clients, I'll give you an example, obviously without names, is he notices that sometimes he's on a meeting and he's receiving Slacks, requests, that he's busy. And he responds to his messages with a tone. How come you didn't get this done? Or I asked for it yesterday, whatever it is. And his assignment was turn off your Slack when you're in a meeting, period. Because you are not going to get the outcome that you want when you are replying like that.
Yeah.
And he knows that. He knows it in his head. He just needs to train his body to not do it.
Everything feels so urgent, and it's really reminding ourselves that it's usually not, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's another part of this is asking what is truly urgent and what is important.
Right.
The distinction there. What is important in our lives and what is urgent? Is it truly going to fall apart if I don't respond in the next minute?
Right.
Probably not. And so practices like that, turn off your Slack while you're in a meeting so you can fully connect with the other person and engage. And if the conversation starts to get uncomfortable, instead of going to Slack or email, it's off. Now find your feet. Laura just asked me a really tough question, or I want to, my automatic thing is to go to my email, notice it, pause, come back. It takes practice. It takes reps, just like anything. So yeah.
I love this question. I'm going to jump around here a tiny bit. This listener says, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Could you share an example of where improving awareness in the workplace led to significant changes, like productivity or team collaboration or just overall well-being in the workplace?
Yeah. Great question. And thank you. An example would be a leader who is a founder of an organization is viewed as harsh and people are scared of her. She comes in, does not say hello to people. She gets right to work, and people are afraid to speak up. She has become more aware of the impact of her state of mind and is able to now slow down, say hello to people, engage with them, tell them what has caused her to act like that. And through her telling them that, they understand her more. She has also said, hey, I know I can do this. I get nervous when I come in. I'm not the most interpersonally strong person, but I'm working on it. I love this company. I love the work that you do. You're not perfect, but I love the work that you do. I'm really working on this. Help me. And tell me when I'm not doing this as well. And what I have seen in the work with this team is they're starting to speak up more, which is what she wants. She doesn't want them to hide information from her, but they have because they've been scared. So she's become more aware of her behavior, her state of mind, the impact on others. She's shared it with them that she's working on it, and they are now more open with her. It did not happen overnight at all. I mean, this is several months of practice and awareness. So that would be an example.
That's an amazing example. I think so. It takes a bit of humility. It sounds like also on everyone's part really to engage in these practices, which can only lead to more empathy and understanding and really collaboration, I imagine.
Yeah, and I'll add to it that it's not just the focus on a state of mind exercise. When I work with teams, I'll share a tool and have them practice it and then get to work and practice the work session using the new tool so they can see a success in productivity while using the new tool. So it's not, again, just viewed as a touchy-feely session. It's touchy-feely, if you want to call it that, for a purpose that's going to impact productivity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you can convince anyone it's about the bottom line, then they're going to pay attention, and it really is. It's not just fluff. It's like, this is actually, like you said, this is science. This is proven.
Yeah.
How does improving individual awareness impact team dynamics? So this is maybe more in the team level and not maybe the leadership level, or just organizational performance. Do you have any anecdotes about teams you've worked with where the team started to really do this? Maybe not top down, but in the midst of the people really working together.
Yeah, so I did a number of exercises. Again, recently, I'm coming off of an offsite, so a lot of these examples are just fresh, literally fresh in my mind, where people shared their lens on their own leadership strengths and areas of development. And each team member shared that, and it helped them to realize how they all have stuff they're working on. Many of them have similarities in the things that they're working on. And by doing that, again, just like the other example, there was this connection that was created. And then through that connection, we then worked on their goals for the quarter. And because they had more of that connection, they were able to get through the goals more effectively and efficiently. So that's an example.
Yeah.
It took, the first time they did it took 3 days. It took them a half a day this time.
What would be like a sign that you would be a good fit for, like someone like you with your skill set would be a great fit for an organization? Like, what are the signs that this is one of the questions that a leader or just a team member may need to focus more? What would you say? And maybe how do you suggest that as a coworker or as an employee? How can those things happen?
Yeah, that's also a great question. Again, getting to the impact. So ex-CEO walks in and people are scared. So someone saying to the CEO, notice the impact. And it's not just that people are scared, it's that you're not getting information that you need that's going to affect the bottom line. So working with a coach would be helpful. Or the team is not communicating effectively. They're not being vulnerable with each other. And the impact is that people are burnt out, and there are 4 people out of 10 that want to leave. So again, what is the impact? Having that conversation can certainly be helpful.
Yeah. So it's pretty obvious, I think, right? When things are not working well, right? So I think when it's tense and everybody's walking on eggshells, when there's one person that's a little bit of an energy vampire, those kind of situations, I think, which are really common and normal. That's the other thing. It doesn't need to be some great stigma or problem. This is just humans figuring out how to work with humans.
I'm so glad you said that, because normalizing it as, look, as humans, we tend to go below the line. it's human nature because we are protecting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving each other grace that this happens. And if we're more aware of it and accepting that it can happen, then we can help each other. Now, there are certain things that are just unacceptable. So
Sure.
I don't want to say all behavior, but I'm glad you brought that up, that the normalization that we do go below the line.
Yeah. I think we have time for probably one more question here. What are this has been such a great talk, by the way. This is so enlightening and it's really helpful. I feel like these are practices, whether or not you work in corporate settings.
They apply to families as well.
Absolutely.
I'll say, I think the reason I love leadership development is because it is also personal development.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So what are some common barriers to achieving a state of awareness in the workplace?
Common barriers. I would say the urgency to get things done,
Mm-hmm.
and the lack of prioritization. So people might not prioritize and not distinguishing the urgent from the important. Is this truly an emergency?
Right.
From what's really important in the long haul. Certainly some cultures. Yeah.
I think that's really, it's a great way to actually wrap up the talk because it's exactly the cartoon that you showed at the very beginning. It's trying to pull the heavy load and someone offers wheels and you say, I don't have time.
Exactly. And I believe we all have the ability to do some slowing down to speed up. If speeding up is what we want, but slowing down to help ourselves and help others. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for sharing so much of your wisdom with us today. I know that everyone who's listened will walk away with lots to chew on and hopefully some pauses in their days, hopefully feeling their feet or their fingers before they respond to difficult things. And I just wanted to let people know where they could find you. The Zukin Leadership is that's your website.
It is, yes.
And yeah, we thank you so much for your time today, Lori. And from the American Center here, we're grateful for the content. So
thank you so much. My pleasure.
Have a great afternoon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.